Last week we left off on kind of this unsettled, like, oh, what can we do to really take action to help support anti-racist policy? We talked about the idea of an anti-racist amendment to the Constitution, which just feels so out of reach. Last week, I saw an announcement of a bill that has just been proposed by Senators Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, and Gillibrand, and it's called the Justice for Black Farmers Act. And some of you got a chance to check out the podcast from 1619. There's a two-part series on kind of a really up close and personal story of a particular Black farming family who was affected by systemic racism in New Orleans. And they really dive deep to see what happened to this particular family as an
I
example.
couldn't get the podcast to work, but they had the transcript, so I read it.
Great.
What's the name of this bill?
It is the Justice for Black Farmers Act. And I'm going to share my screen so we can check it out a little bit. I have gone so far down the rabbit hole researching this act. And what I'd like us to consider for today's class, and actually for more than today's class, is first of all, using art as a lens to better understand and take notes and sort of kind of visually research this act. So we're going to be kind of illustrating our sketchbooks today, understanding this act better. But then I think that there's real potential here, if we're interested, to use art to potentially help support this act and encourage lawmakers to pay extra attention to it and help get it passed. So I wanted to do kind of a big overview today, and there's just so much. But I'm thinking that this is an opportunity that we might be able to maybe send postcards to our representatives, to representatives all over the country. I don't know.
When I'm done with my Georgia ones.
There you go. Yeah, so to hopefully use art to make a difference to help support this policy. But first, what is this policy? What is it all about? The Justice for Black Farmers Act. So I'll have to put all these links up on our website.
This is at Cory Booker's website, it looks like.
Cory Booker's website, so end of November 2020. And it's addressing discrimination in federal agriculture policy. So we've talked in the past about how essential it is to change policy to really like make a difference when it comes to big systemic racism. And the problem that they're trying to address is that the number of Black farmers has gone from early 20th century being pretty much equal to like the percentage of Black people in the country. So, there were, maybe like 20-something% of Black people in the country, 17% of farms were owned by Black farmers. That's very reasonable, like, okay, this reflects the representation of Black people in the country. Cool. Since then, there's been a huge drop off in the number of Black farmers. This quote here from Senator Warren: "For decades, racist policies have robbed Black farmers of the economic opportunity to thrive in our country's agricultural industry." So one thing I think we can do today is just start taking notes and illustrating them together to figure out what this act is all about, what it's going to do for Black farmers, and after illustrating it, see where we can go from there. So what are the discriminatory practices that have led to Black farmers being historically excluded and essentially pushed out of their farm?
Can you keep scrolling?
Yeah.
Thank you. Stop. Thank you.
And this woman, oh my gosh, Leah Penniman, such an incredible leader and activist. She runs Soul Fire Farm, and she has an incredible book called Farming While Black. I should mention I'm particularly attached to this issue because I have worked with a young gardeners program in Galveston, which is specifically encouraging kids to make a connection to nature. But we do live in Galveston. It's a very Black and brown community. And part of our mission was to encourage kids, especially kids of color, to get interested in careers around farming or food growing or anything like that.
Can you scroll again while you talk?
So, yeah, sure. So we read her book, Leah Penniman's book, as part of just being a part of that organization. So it's really inspiring to me to see so many important thought leaders coming together about this issue, which I think also ties into ideas of reparations. You know, this is not what some people think about when they think of reparations. You know, it's not like a direct cash advance given to
It's not backward looking, it's forward looking.
well, and both really. It's acknowledging the injustices that have happened up until now, and then saying, how do we find equity? First, ending discrimination within the USDA. I don't want us to have to read the exact entire paragraph right now, but basically, especially if you read the or listened or read to the 1619 podcast, you'll know that there is evidence of specific racial discrimination that is going on in the USDA. So it would be really seeking out that policy and ending it. Protecting remaining Black farmers from land loss. So this is something I'd like to learn more about. Like, each one of these is just the tip of the iceberg for a much larger issue. But one of the ways that Black farmers have been discriminated against is an heirs property law. So I'm not exactly sure how it works. I need to continue the research, but because in the past there was a law that said you have to use a very specific way of passing down your farm. If you don't do it that way, then your land will be repossessed, as far as I understand it now. A whole lot of land was essentially stolen from Black farmers who had been working that land and given to white farmers. So that's one way that this has broken down and systemically dispossessed farmers. Restoring the land base lost by Black farmers. Creating a farm conservation corps. I love that the act also includes education investments, so empowering historically Black colleges and universities to provide resources, scholarships, funding for farmers who are interested in majoring in agriculture. Assisting all socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and enacting system reforms. So today, honestly, it's just overwhelming. There's so much. I want to turn the tables to y'all and think about how can we start illustrating this in a way that is interesting. It's going to give us some, something that we can look at in our sketchbook and see the essential information that we want to remember about this bill, and how might we start making it visually engaging. What sort of pictures can we draw? A couple of other inspirations. This is cool. This is all of the endorsements, tons of them. If y'all would like today, we can look at the actual act. So this is a section by section summary that they look at in court.
So I know that this is a drawing class.
Mm-hmm.
And you and Carol can certainly tell me that I'm off base, but I would rather add to last week's page, what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
Another bullet that just says research and possibly support this bill, and spend the time learning about the bill, and then figuring out how we can use our art to support it, which could be postcards.
Totally, Judith. So
Would that
Uh,
work for you, Carol?
Well, I was looking forward to drawing without knowing what I could draw. But maybe Jessica, because you're steps ahead of us, have already thought about what we could draw. I agree that we could definitely add it to that earlier page of what to do. I think that's in a different notebook for me. But
awesome.
yeah, I would add that.
I'd love to do somehow.
Maybe what we could draw, I'm sorry.
Or,
Maybe
well-
what we could draw is as we dive a little further into the act.
That we could be drawing.
We could start sketching things that might be good to put on postcards later on. So they would be the rough sketches for what our drawings would be on postcards later on. Does that work?
This is exactly the conversation I was hoping would be sparked, because we're starting to step into the realm of social justice art, or I've heard it also referred to as artivism instead of activism, artivism. So I almost feel like, now we're in the realm of like, we're in the classroom, and instead of me, the teacher, telling y'all exactly what we're going to do, I'm loving that you guys can start to generate what.
Well, I agree with Carol. It'd be nice to draw, but for me, what would work would be, I'm going to add it to what can we do page from last week.
Perfect.
And then on another piece of paper, not in my book, I'm going to start, as we talk, sketching things that could go on postcards. I'll tell you what made me think of that in particular. The postcards that I'm doing this time are different than the ones I did last time for Georgia. And this is what the front of the postcard looks like, pre-printed. Oop.
That's beautiful.
So, and it's already addressed. All I do is write this long message, which,
Wait, so I'm sorry, would you hold the front up again? This is,
okay, so this is from the Democratic Party. And it's encouraging people to vote. Can you see it?
Yes, okay.
And
So
then on the back,
information.
we write a message.
Yeah. So what's sparking in my brain is, what if we have an illustration centerpiece, sort of like that peach, except hopefully something even more interesting. Perhaps we illustrate our own text of some key facts, and would then send that into potentially all of Congress. What I'm thinking today we can do is, I can put up some images, maybe the faces of some of the farmers or their actual farms or what they're growing. And then I can read to y'all, and we can just talk as we draw some of the many articles that I've come across about this issue.
Sounds good. Oops.
So there's just so much. And I think we'll spend at least a few weeks on this in its different forms. So
Yeah, I would be willing, if we did postcards that we liked, I'd be willing to take mine to Kinko's and have them run them off as,
oh, that would be
up
great.
postcards and send them to wherever we decide.
Cool.
So these are the provosts. If you read or listened to the podcast, this is June. This is Winselis. He goes
Wow.
by his wife, and I'm not sure exactly who that third guy is, but it's all in there. So we could potentially draw one of them, and I could be reading. This is a very long article, however, about their story. It goes even more in depth than the podcast did. But there's some beautiful images of their family here. or the farm, of course, being good to
Like
have.
the farm, of course.
Yeah.
I like the farm. I also like the picture of her with that upright, that was a sugar cane she was
Sugar
holding.
cane. Yeah.
That, she looks like half of American Gothic revised.
Right.
You know what? I can, let me put both of these on the same screen. All right. And I will be reading from The Guardian, an article called "It's Not Fair, Not Right, How America Treats Its Black Farmers." So it says sugarcane farmers can't survive without large crop loans. For the provost, who say they suffered decades of discrimination, this could be the end of the line. That's the summary. And just pop in and interrupt me if y'all want to discuss anything, but I'm just going to dive in here. Alrighty. On the summer day in 2014 that June Provost found 3 stray cats dead and lined up side by side in his tractor, the forecast had called for rain. It was hot and overcast, and the air like a heavy and suffocating blanket, and the sugar cane was already 6 feet high. Wenceslas Provost Jr., who has gone by the name June since he can remember, stared in shock at the cats, each one with the tabby markings of strays. He could see no visible lacerations, no inside spilling out. He guessed it had been the work of a BB gun or a strangling. He looked away, disgusted. As the breeze rattled through the sugarcane leaves, he thought, this is a warning. A year earlier, June and his wife, Angie, had found a chain tied around the steering wheel of a tractor and the hydraulic line stuffed with mud. But the dead cats were a marked escalation in intimidation. The following day, June had found the windows of another tractor shot out. Later that season, someone hid cinder blocks in Angie's fields to ruin the equipment. Around that same time, Angie and June noticed vehicles parking near her farm, her fields, the drivers watching her work. June recognized one of the drivers as a representative of M.A. Patout and Son Sugar Mill, the company he contracted with to harvest and mill his sugarcane. The whole season became an unrelenting act of apparent sabotage. Motor oil repeatedly drained from vehicles. Fuel lines were filled with water. There was hardly a week without an incident. This was someone trying to stop the operation, June says. They knew exactly what to do with the tractor. After multiple police reports, June says, the sheriff's deputy told them, someone wants what you have by any means necessary. In mid-May, the South Louisiana earth is parched, and the cane is nothing but 2-foot tall grass. Once the rain comes, it will grow like weeds. By August, the sugarcane will tower over grown men, and by late fall, it will be milled to molasses and raw sugar. During milling season, the entire town will smell like syrup. It's a landscape reminiscent of the one shown in the television drama Queen Sugar. There it is. Produced by Oprah Winfrey Network and based on the novel by Natalie Bazile. Ooh, I'm gonna have to get that. About a black sugarcane farm family determined to save their land despite blatant racism and land grabbing by the white sugar mill owners. Each year in Louisiana, farmers produce 13 million tons of sugarcane, generating $3 billion. It's a lucrative crop to produce due to regulated production limits and tariff rate quotas that protect U.S. supply from foreign competition. It is, as American Sugarcane League proudly notes, arguably the most successful crop in the history of our state. As a child, June, now 42, would prop his elbows in the windows of his dad's baby blue Ford, and they would ride out to check the cane fields, some of which had been farmed by his family for 4 generations. As a teenager, he filled diesel tanks and monitored oil levels in the tractors. At 18, he officially went to work on the family's 2,500-acre farm. After his father retired in 2006, June began the process to purchase the business. June Provost had the measurements of a successful farmer. He held nearly 4,500 acres and had been farming all his life. At 18, he won the state's highest yield contest, 8,588 pounds of sugar per acre, 57% above the parish average. In 2008,
57%?
57% above the parish average.
Whoa, that's huge.
Yeah, #1 most successful farmer in Louisiana. In the podcast, I remember him talking about how that really put their family in the spotlight too. His father won, not number one, but like number 12 or something. So yeah, it was a big deal. He's a good farmer. Da, 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 da. In 2008, the Louisiana Farm Bureau deemed him the Farmer of the Year for Iberia Parish. But he says he endured years of discrimination in the form of coercive contracts, fraud, below market crop loans, vandalism, and retaliation for speaking out about the mistreatment of Black farmers until he was finally forced out of business in 2015. They took my livelihood, my family's legacy, says June, his voice swelling with grief. They took what I love. June Provost's exit from farming follows that of many Black farmers in surrounding parishes. The U.S. Census of Agriculture statistics show a 44.7% decrease in Black farm operators in Iberia Parish, where the Provosts lived between 2007 and 2012, compared with a 12.3% decrease in white farm operators. In neighboring Vermilion Parish, where June farmed the majority of his sugarcane, Black farm operators decreased by 17% between 2002 and 2012, while white farmers increased by 6%. Nationally, less than 2% of farmers are Black. And remember, that's down from the original early 20th century, like 17-ish percent.
Million. Mm-hmm.
About 1 million farmers. Mm-hmm. June says that there were approximately 60 Black sugarcane farmers in the area in 1983. He keeps their names neatly printed, line after line, in a notebook. By 2000, that number had dwindled to 17. Today, June and Angie count only 4. On a humid May morning, and I just want to pause real quick because I think this is why it's so important to hear these stories and to get behind the statistics. I think we've talked a little bit before about how you hear statistics and it almost makes it sound as if it's that person's fault. Like, oh, the number of Black farmers has decreased drastically by X percent, or, oh, the scores of Black children are XYZ percent, you know? And if you don't know any better, it can sound like, oh, well, they must be doing something wrong if they're suddenly losing all these points. And that is, in the end, kind of a racist reaction to think that it's the people who are responsible for not maintaining their numbers, when, as we continue to dive deeper, we can see that it's policies and, in this case, very specific discrimination, singling out Black people, Black farmers in this case, and working against them, from actual like terrorism in their home, you know, murdered cats in the tractor, and just people doing whatever they can to push these Black farmers out. But it also comes back to the policy. So anyway, that just popped in my head.
How did you come across this act?
Good question. Oh, you know what? It's because on Instagram, I follow a local farm near Galveston, called Moondog Farms. They are owned by the woman who runs the nonprofit that I used to work for, the Galveston Farmers Market and the Young Gardeners Program. And she had published like, oh, hey, this act is coming out. This is exciting, you know, let's support this bill. And I was like, ooh, what is this bill? Justice for Black farmers. So yeah, from one Instagram post, I clicked. Next thing I saw the Cory Booker article, but this was like the entrance to the rabbit hole that just goes so deep. But anyway, okay. Alrighty. On a humid May morning, the attorney Quentin Robinson rolls his briefcase toward a rental car in downtown Lafayette, Louisiana. He wears a crisp blue shirt, a striped bow tie, and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses on top of his head. The Provost case, he says, is one of day versus night, right versus wrong, with practices that can only be described as practices out of darkness. The family story is decades long and mind bending, accompanied by stacks of police reports, loan documents, foreclosure notices, and legal petitions. The provost assert that white sugarcane farmers have been consistently offered more favorable loans and contracts by lenders and other agricultural entities than their black counterparts. A lawsuit filed on 21 December by attorneys for the provost alleged that First Guarantee Bank treated June differently than similarly situated white borrowers, violating on 8 counts the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and the Fair Housing Act, and Louisiana's Unfair Trade Practices and Consumer Protection Law. In a statement, First Guarantee Bank denies such allegations, calling them completely unfounded and frivolous, adding that it has not and does not engage in discriminatory practices. According to the lawsuit, the bank also required excessive collateral and unnecessarily supervised June's farm spending account. The suit alleges that the bank forced him to reduce his sugarcane acreage against expert recommendations from Louisiana State University agronomists. First Guarantee Bank disputes this, arguing that future loans to Provost were declined since his yields were too low to service the debt and he defaulted on the prior loans. This is, of course, coming from the guy who has the highest yields in Louisiana.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
And when you get to that second issue of the podcast episode about their story, I mean, that was one of them that got me just crying. And the evidence, and I'm not sure where things are in their case by now, but the evidence is just overwhelming that there was blatant racial discrimination in his case. The lawsuit also alleges that the bank unfairly delayed the approval and disbursement of loan funds for farm expenses and vastly underfunded June's annual crop loans, which impinged on his ability to produce a good crop. And I think this is why policy is so essential. Going back to my personal commentary here, when you listen to the 1619 podcast on Black farmers, it explains that in order to have a successful farm, you have to take out a loan. And with his original farm, June needed something like $2 million just for the expenses of, fertilizer, seed, gas for your tractor and all that. And it's just part of the rollout is like, if you have X amount of farm, you need a certain amount of money to even be able to run what you got. And what happened was bit by bit, they underfunded and didn't loan him the amount that would be necessary for him to just do the basic operations of his farm.
So were they actually trying to have him default?
When you hear the podcast, yes. I can't remember.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I think there was like a someone in the First Guarantee Bank kind of went in and found June's folder. And I think from what I remember, my memory is always questionable. They pulled out the file and saw that his original loan had been doctored, so that instead of the loan being for the $2 million, that someone had gone in and changed it and said, oh, he only wants like a $1 million loan, which wouldn't be enough for him to continue on. So it appears that from the first time he went to get a loan for his farm, there was racial discrimination where they singled him out, like, you are not going to be successful here. And then after that initial injustice, it just kept getting worse. And then it sounds like it got really personal with farmers in his neighborhood. But this is also just one story. I continue. How far along are we in this article? Okie dokie.
The problem with drawing this
how's it going?
house is that unless you know what it is, I feel like it should be a red barn.
Maybe they don't have red barns in sugarcane.
I know.
Very New England.
Yeah. My brother used to live in Lafayette, Louisiana, and then they moved a few years ago to New Orleans. But I remember driving down to go visit them, and it's absolutely stunning how much sugarcane you drive through from Texas to through Lafayette. I mean, we couldn't believe it. It's really, you can see what a huge impact it is on the economy. And it smells really good when they burn it. Alrighty. Dive back into the article.
Mhm.
In 2008, June's second season of farming on his own, the sugarcane production cost was $615 per acre, but June was only loaned $194 per acre. After weeding and fertilizing, he had little left to repair or purchase equipment. By fall, he could barely afford to pay his workers, let alone plant new cane for future production. The provost argued that First Guarantee Bank and United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, approved years of unfeasible loans that were too small for the scale of June's production and dispersed too late in the season, and that when he failed, they collected on his collateral. Such lending discrimination, Angie argues, can be observed just by looking at the fields around South Louisiana. By summer, white farmers' fields are well-drained, weed-free, laser-leveled, whereas black farmers' fields are overrun with Johnson grass, a noxious weed. Visual proof, says Angie, the black farmers are provided fewer resources than white farmers. You have to see it as a giant web, and every time you move in one way, it pulls you back in another, says Hank Sanders, an attorney who is regularly involved in strategy with the Provost legal team. White supremacy is such a powerful thing, and it manifests itself in these various entities and institutions. And I'm going to comment again because June Provost talks about this in the podcast, and it again is just the thing that strikes me over and over again, why we misunderstand systemic racism, and people tend to think in racist judgments. But even June Provost said he used to look around at other black farmers and think, why are they starting so late in the year? Why would they do that when they know, like, oh, I guess they're just not very good farmers, blah, 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 until he was the victim of this same discrimination. And he remembered sitting in his farm completely unable to do anything because he wasn't able to get the loan, and just thinking like all these other farmers are driving by thinking I'm a bad farmer, when really, like, I know what to do, I just can't do it. And it's not that he was a subpar farmer, it was the policies and the discrimination that did not allow him to do what he wanted to be doing. So some people might see that difference between black farmer and white farmer's land and say, oh, it's the black farmer's fault for not knowing what to do. But when you start looking at the world through hopefully an anti-racist lens, you don't just look at the individual and say, oh, they didn't get their stuff together in time. You start to think, why is there such a marked difference? What is the policy behind that? So
a backstory, was it the father able to get the loans he needed, or
yeah, apparently
things had been better for him than they were then for the son?
Yeah, it sounds like the trouble started when they had to switch banks. So they had been using the same bank for decades. His father, his grandfather, this is like 5 generations of black farmers or something. Whenever he switched to a new bank because their previous bank was no longer doing farm loans, that's when the discrimination.
That was why the problem developed.
Let's see. Now almost 76 years old, Sanders, this is the attorney we were just talking about, was one of the primary lawyers for the plaintiffs in Pigford versus Glickman, a groundbreaking lawsuit brought in 1977 against the USDA by black farmers alleging racial discrimination in federal farm assistance and lending. The Pigford case resulted in more than 1,500 claimants receiving compensation, including June, his brothers, and Winslow Sr. After Pigford, the 2008 Farm Bill and a 2010 vote by Congress led to the appropriation of $1.25 billion for a settlement that included thousands of additional Black farmers. The Pigford case illuminated the long, old wound of Black farmland loss in America, which began with the broken promise by the federal government to give 40 acres and a mule to each family of emancipated slaves. While Abraham Lincoln envisioned the USDA as the People's Department, Black farmers have another name for the agency, the last plantation. Ooh, dang.
Whoa.
And that leads to a whole nother article. This is how the rabbit hole gets deeper. That's a whole nother article I'm gonna have to read later called The Last Plantation. The tactics are to strangle the life from all Black farmers, and it's being done in multiple ways, says Sanders. And the US government is as much in on the strangling as any other entity and has generally been complicit in running hundreds of thousands of Black folks off the farm and destroying their way of life. When June couldn't afford labor, he worked long days alone. His mother, Bernadette, says he did the work of 4 and 5 men. He'd pick up tractor tires or 50-gallon drums by himself and shovel drains by hand. He'd go to work at 3 a.m. just to get everything done. There was always, "Mom, I don't have enough money to do this," Bernadette says. "Look how long they're taking with my loan. What am I going to do?" Her voice breaks and she begins to cry. It seeped the life out of his body. "Give up," she told him. "Mama, I can't. It's my life." But there was another reason June could not give up. He was forced by another bank to guarantee his parents' loans, says Angie, recalling that Mid-South Bank required June and his brothers to sign a security agreement for their father's crop loans. Without his signature, June knew his father's crop loan would have been denied, so he signed. "You can't abandon your debt because you can't abandon your parents," she says. Robinson says accumulation of generational debt highlights a discrepancy between lender treatment of white and Black farmers. If you look at the white farming community's farm transition from one generation to the next, it's smooth. If you look at Black farm transition from one generation to the next, it's chaos. They took June's father's debt and piled it on top of him. There's no way June could have survived. In the lawsuit, lawyers for the family argue that First Guarantee Bank required far more collateral from the provost than similarly situated white farmers, an allegation the bank vehemently denies. The bank took lien positions on June's personal residence, parents' residence, farm equipment, farm payments from the USDA, crops and the earnings from the crops, and equipment lease payments. In his years of representing Black farmers, Sanders says he's seen clear patterns used by government and private entities to disrupt their farming operations. You rob somebody on the street, that's a crime that carries a prison term. But in this web, if you make a decision with your pencil and your paper, it's robbery nonetheless. So this article, we're only halfway through. It's a long one. I'm going to post it right now in the anti-racist art class website.
I'm trying to find the link to the actual act.
Sure, let me put that in the.
Can you put that?
Absolutely.
Where are you putting it? In the Mighty Network?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have a number?
It is. I don't see a number yet. And I don't know if that's because it is, it's not going to go before the floor until next session.
Mm-hmm.
Or actually, this is the kind of thing, I'm sorry, I just stopped sharing. Are y'all all right with the picture? Yeah. Okay, great. This whole investigation is making me realize how little I know about the process of government. And I am just so passionate right now about wanting to do whatever I can as a citizen to raise awareness about this act, to show support for it before it comes before Congress. And so I really want to think about investigating what can I do as a citizen to show my support for this, to raise awareness? What do I need to know? Who are the people that it would matter the most for them to, you know, hear about this? Is there a way for us as artists or artivists, however you want to think of it, to use art to get people informed? You know, I'm thinking suddenly, Judith, of all the murals in New York. That's one way. And yeah, I would really like to invite y'all as well to make suggestions of what we can do together as an art class. If there's, I thought the postcards were such a great.
That's what I've been doing, is drawing out a postcard, which I haven't finished, but
Well, I'd like to know your lingering questions, because I feel like today is a class where we're going to end up with more questions than answers, but I want to keep researching this for next class and come back with, do you think there are some key statistics that we could illustrate? I could try and find some stuff like that. Or is
I
it
think
more?
one of the questions that I always have when, I mean, I trust you, so I believe this is a good thing, but I always want to know what the opposition is and why would someone not want to vote for this?
And I think that's so important, because if we send this, you know, these postcards to all of the lawmakers in the land, obviously there would be many who prefer the status quo, don't think anything's wrong. And, you know, of course, just to make sure that we are on the right side of history, we want to make sure that we're checking
Right.
the depths of this thing that we're saying we support. And who knows, maybe there is a case to be made in the opposite side. I mean, obviously there must be, or else there wouldn't be a discussion about it.
The case is Black people don't deserve to farm. I guess. I mean, what?
Well, I no, I don't
except-
mean the prejudice against it, because that I'm sure there's prejudice. I mean, is there a factual basis that someone could argue that this is not a good act?
We can't. The factual basis for that disguises all the other is we can't afford it. Right? I mean, we can't afford health care for people. We can't afford to protect farmers. We can't afford, you know, anything that they don't want. They don't have to out and out say this is totally abhorrent to me because white farmers are more important. That they can just say we don't have the money to do it.
Right. And I think in this case, they're introducing a lot of regulation and spending a lot of money that would specifically go toward righting an injustice. And I think what their argument would be is there is no injustice here. You know, it's just like the Provost farm, as an example. You have the bank saying one thing, oh, we weren't discriminatory at all, we didn't do anything. And then you have the huge, you know, piles of evidence from the provosts. And so that is working itself out in court. But I have the same curiosity, like what's really at the heart of this? What is the most persuasive argument that we can present as citizens?
It's an excellent. I mean, presumably, because the provosts have saved all their documents, and they can be compared to what loans were given to white farmers. I mean, there should be a lot of clear evidence.
And it might be just a thing to illustrate. Well, thank you for going on this journey with me today, guys. Y'all want to show off your drawings before we head out to?
Mine might be too light for you to see. I'm starting to block in a postcard.
Can you move it over, Judith?
Yeah, and down a little bit. It looks great. The Justice for Black Farmers Act. Looking good.
I want to put the link on here, which I'll do. But it would take me to next week to our next discussion to know what the message on the other side should be.
Well, this is going to be a long-term project instead of a, instead of us doing a new topic every week. I definitely want to spend several classes on this. So
When does this go? I think we need to know when this goes in front of the legislature.
not until spring.
Oh,
So there's a lot of time.
And has anything happened in the House that would be a parallel support?
Not that I know of. This just came out, at the end of November. So it's only a week or two old out there. I'll be really interested to see the unfolding story.
Okay, I can show you with colored pencils.
Ooh.
oh, I like it.
The only thing that bothers me a bit, I put him on this side because of the way his head is turned toward her, but then I'm not sure I like the sugar cane.
I had the sugar cane go behind her.
Oh, as if he's got it. Yeah, good idea. Because it feels right that he's holding the cane,
Yeah.
that it would go behind her. Thanks. I
And I
can't.
think I think I'm going to have to write somewhere sugar cane. Because I think there are a lot of people who would not know that this was sugar cane.
No, you're right. And that's why, I mean, it looks like he's just carrying a big stick.
Right.
Oh, hey, the colored pencil erased.
Good.
So she's quite pale, but she is, I guess, at least partly black or mixed black.
Yes.
Angie.
I believe she also, in the podcast, they talked about her coming from a long line of farmers.
Yes, I did say that. Well, now it looks like he's poking her in the arm. Oh, well. Anyway.
It's so good to see you.
Bye.